Welcome back to the TwinSpires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hanson ahead of a big rivalry day, actually. If you're in Kentucky, James has his blue on, I've got my red on, and Vance is playing it neutral, but he's a Louisville fan. Just so you know, I'm outing him as a Louisville fan. But we're not here to talk about basketball. We have a lot to debate about the older dirt male division. Disco Time just came off a huge performance in the Dwyer as a 3-year-old, and it might bode well for his next year's season as a 4-year-old. We'll also debate the older dirt male division for 2025 because it's a bit wide open and it might result in some controversy. We'll find out in January. But in light of that, we're going to debate the history of the older male division and some of the more controversial results at the end of our show. To start things off, though, I'll kick it off with Vance. Looking at Disco Time's massive win in the Dwyer over the weekend, do you believe he'll be a top contender in the older dirt male division in 2026?
I think he has the potential. He is undefeated. He has three big wins this year, way back in January in the Lecomte Stakes at Fairgrounds. And he has been handled quite well, I think, by trainer Brad Cox. He saw this horse had a lot of potential last winter after the Lecomte, but he wasn't working to his satisfaction. So he gave him plenty of time off, and he's come up with two huge races in August or September rather, winning the St. Louis Derby in a walk at Fairmount Park. And now, as you mentioned, his big win this past Saturday in the Dwyer at Aqueduct. Of course, that was against a very small field going a one-turn mile. Still, he won it very impressively in a very fast time and got a huge speed figure out of it too. So Disco Time's got immense talent. The problem going forward, though, is that their next big target to start 2026 is the Saudi Cup, richest race in the world, $20 million. It's a one-turn mile and an eighth. It seems like a race perfectly suited for the horse, but when you go to Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, chances are you're not going to be competing in America all that much. So I could see a very limited campaign from this horse next season. Saudi Cup, probably then the Met Mile at Saratoga, and then maybe one start before the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile at Keeneland. Immense talent, no doubt about it. A very exciting prospect for next year, but I just don't think we're going to see a whole lot of him throughout the course of his 4-year-old campaign.
James, you grew up in the disco era, right? One of your favorite times. I'll let you talk about Disco Time next.
Yeah, one of my favorite times. That's a good one.
He has a better living memory of it than we do.
As far as Vance is right. He's got a lot going for him right now, being 5 for 5 and winning these two races since coming back from a layoff. Both of them impressively by open lengths, like he has. Definitely going to be an exciting prospect for 2026. One element, as far as the question goes, is that we're going to have journalism and Baeza are back for next year. Sovereignty could return as well, having missed the Breeders' Cup Classic. I know he was initially targeting the Dubai World Cup, and his plans are undetermined, but there's a chance he could be racing in the U.S. next year. So it's going to be got a good group of older horses coming back. And the real question moving forward for Disco Time to me is distance. All this starts so far have come from 7 furlongs to a mile and a 16th. And he'll get his chance at a one-turn mile and an eighth, which is a good fit for him in the Saudi Cup. But there's a chance for every young will be aiming for that race. Nysos is definitely being targeted for that race, Baffert announced, and others. So that would be no easy spot. In fact, all the horses he's been beating, I mean, none of them are even graded winners, at least the runner-ups and top, third place finisher. It's a bunch of listed stakes types. So he's going to get a class check. And like I said, that non-furlong distance will be a key thing because not this time adds plenty of stamina, and that might be the deciding factor as he goes longer if he proves effective. But his dam side is really sort of speedy, and it just seems like these middle distances, based on a small sample so far, have hit him right between the eyes. So if non-furlongs doesn't work out next year, he's going to be targeting a race like the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And how do you get to a race like that? Or the Met Mile in the spring, the Dirt Mile in the fall? How do you get to those races? Well, when Cody's Wish won back-to-back dirt miles. He was using 7 furlong Grade 1 races like the Churchill Downs Sprint and the Forgo at Saratoga as preps. So there's always a potential that Disco Time could take those type of races in pursuit of a race like the dirt mile if longer distances don't work out.
And Cody's Wish did win older dirt male a couple years ago, so it's not unheard of. You don't have to go through the Breeders' Cup Classic, right?
Horse of the year, yeah.
Horse of the year too.
Yeah.
But as far as Disco Time, you mentioned some of those horses that he'd have to go up against, some of those 3-year-olds that are also going to be turning 4, Sovereignty, Journalism, Baeza. Baeza does look like the way he finished his 3-year-old campaign, he could be getting better with age, and 4-year-old season could be where he really starts turning it up. Journalism, up and down year, I feel like, but certainly could improve as a 4-year-old as well. And then there are the older horses that we're going to debate in our next question that kind of left it up in the air. We don't know who's going to win. It's not for sure. There's no one that I think anyone would say is consensus pick for older dirt male this year. So Disco Time at least would have that benefit of going up against these horses that were a little inconsistent this year and make the older dirt male division wide open in 2025. But you all made the good points about we don't know what his max distance will be and where he's going to end up, if it's going to be the dirt mile, if it's going to be the classic potentially. But he has a lot to answer early on, and he did miss a lot of his 3-year-old campaign, so he'll need to make sure he doesn't miss as much time as a 4-year-old. But at least he did finish out with a massive win this past weekend. Only had 3 horses to beat, but they probably were some of his toughest competition so far with Tip Top Thomas, Crudo, and then Stars and Stripes, who was coming off a huge allowance win. So still an impressive win, even if it was a short field.
Yeah, and I misspoke. None of his runner-ups were graded stakes winners. Tip Top Thomas, I think he did win the Indiana Derby, so he finished 3rd in that race. So but that was, I think, the most accomplished rival, like to your point, that he's faced so far.
That brings us now to the older dirt male division of 2025. You could make a case for quite a few horses, and I think we all maybe have one that we're leaning toward, but the question is, I'll start with you, James. Who would you say is our Eclipse Award winner in 2025 for the older dirt male division?
I think it's Forever Young. I thought he proved it in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He faced all the horses that were in the running in that race against him. Starting, I look back at last year, and Forever Young, he ran a close 3rd in the Derby and 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And, Sierra Leone beat him twice. And he was champion 3-year-old male, and Fierceness was the runner-up for champion 3-year-old male, and he beat him in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So those 3 horses were, pretty close last year. And once again, they all showed up in the Breeders' Cup. Forever Young having, making his first U.S. start. But Sierra Leone had a Grade 1 win in the Whitney Pacific Class. Fierceness had a Grade 1 win in the Pacific Classic. And Forever Young beat them both. And for me, that's going to be the difference maker. I still think that those are the 3 best older dirt males, though, too. I think a horse like Mindframe, who did all his running in the first half of the season, or at least all his winning, he put all his eggs in one basket with the Breeders' Cup Classic, and he was no match for those top 3. And if you do have a hang up and for a completely subjective reason, you don't believe in voting on horses that only race once in the U.S., then I would be leaning towards Sierra Leone if that was like a rule or something. But with that not being a rule, I'm going to vote for Forever Young for champion dirt older male or whatever, Vance.
Vance, are you allowed to reveal your votes, or just to say hypothetical?
We publicize all the time, and James and I, being National Turf Writers and Broadcasters members, our votes are actually published after the turn of the year. So that's all publicized. And I agree with James. I'm going to probably lean towards Forever Young. This is going to be an unprecedented vote if he wins this division, because no horse in the older dirt male division has ever won the award with just one U.S. appearance. So we've had that a lot in the turf divisions, both male and female, over the years, with Europeans coming over and winning Breeders' Cup races and basically defaulting into the Eclipse Award Turf Championships. But this will be something new for Forever, if Forever Young gets a plurality of the vote. And uh, winning, obviously beating Sierra Leone and Fierceness in the Breeders' Cup Classic straight up is a huge plus in his favor. But also the fact that those two rivals, I think, simply didn't do enough during the course of the year. Sierra Leone just won the Whitney. He placed in his other four stakes appearances, so he only has the one victory to fall back on. Fierceness won the Ali Sheba and the Pacific Classic, but then he lost three times during the year, twice head to head against Sierra Leone. So those two just didn't distinguish themselves against each other and against uh, or dominate the division enough, I think, to eclipse, no pun intended, Forever Young in this category. So Forever Young will made some history on Breeders' Cup Day. I think he should make some more history come Eclipse Award time.
I'm in agreement with you all, and we're about to talk about unprecedented results or controversial results. So I don't think it's a surprise if Forever Young does come through and win this with one North American start. He also had Group 1, Grade 1 wins overseas this season. And like you've mentioned, both of you, who he beat in the Classic, kind of knocks out some of those other contenders in Fierceness and Sierra Leone. Plus, Sierra Leone only had one win this season from 5 starts. Sure, he was graded stakes placed as well, but the fact that he only had one win from those 5 starts, I think you have to knock him down a peg. I do think Mindframe deserves a little bit more credit. He does have 2 Grade 1 wins. And you talk about James later in the season, he had to kind of prove himself in the Classic, but Jockey Club Gold Cup, he was taken out of that race with Phileas Fogg running into him. And I feel like you kind of have to draw a line through that. Maybe he would have won that race had it been a clean trip, but he does have 2 Grade 1s. Sierra Leone can't say that. Fierceness can't say that either. So I think Mindframe deserves technically to be second. Or you could make a case for Nisos, though he finished out with the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, won the San Diego Handicap at Grade 2, and he has a Grade 3. And his only loss in his career and only loss of the season was a neck to Mindframe in the Churchill Downs Stakes off a more than year-long layoff. But again, he just only has that one Grade 1 to his resume this season. So Mindframe has the 2 Grade 1s. If you're going to go off of Grade 1 victories, then I think he deserves second to Forever Young.
Listen, Mindframe was in training after he finished up the first half of the season, and they entered him from July 1st through the Breeders' Cup Classic. They entered him in 3 races, and he won none of them. Now, I know there's some extenuating circumstances, this, that, and the other. But the fact is, if you're going to enter in 3 races, you got nothing health-wise that would cause you whatever. But 2 of those races, they just weren't running him. I mean, if you're not going to race and these other horses are running against each other and competing for, they're competing for the championship. Mindframe didn't do anything after June 28th to say he deserves a vote for champion male. And that's my hang up with him.
That's a fair point. He did scratch quite a bit in the second half of the season when we were waiting for him to show back up again.
Yeah, he scratched out of the Whitney, lost the
fifth
jockey.
place in the Classic really hurts him.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that was going to be a big race because he had never won at a mile and a quarter. And, if he had finished in the top 3 and had given a good account of himself, it would have been one thing, but he was pretty well beaten in 5th.
As a personal criteria, counting Grade 1 wins just has never been my style, because not all Grade 1 races are created equal. And so to me, the depth of the race, I think, is more important than the grade attached to it. And not to diminish Mindframe's 2 Grade 1 wins, but he wasn't facing the very best in the division in those races. I think, as we stated at the top of the debate here, the 3 horses that we were talking about as division leaders were Sierra Leone, Fierceness, and Forever Young, and Mindframe didn't do enough against them.
That's a fair point. The Churchill Downs Stakes, I think he was facing very, very tough sprinters. But Stephen Foster only had 5 rivals to beat. Sierra Leone was one of them, but he was coming off a bit of a layoff, I believe, that race. So
and the speed in that race could be long, stock, and scratched, and that was a paceless race. But I mean, he won it, so
yeah,
you got to give him credit.
We'll find out who wins the older dirt male division in January, and you already heard some votes right here, so you got a little preview of that. But now we're going to talk about the history of this award and where we believe there might have been some controversy in the past. I will start with you, Vance. Who do you consider one of the more controversial winners of the older dirt male or older male division?
Well, I have a feeling both of you are going to touch on events of the past 10 or 15 years when grass horses suddenly started winning this division, and they actually had to put in fine print the word dirt to differentiate between who is eligible or should be eligible for this award and who wasn't. But I'll go back even further, nearly 30 years, go back 1997. Skipaway won the first of his two titles that year, but clearly, if you look at the past performances, head to head competition, he was literally the third best older horse of 1997. His competition was Gentleman, who he lost to in his only head to head meeting with in the Pimlico Special. And then there was Formal Gold, who ran against Skipaway 6 times and finished in front of him 4 times. Unfortunately, Gentleman and Formal Gold, neither one of them made the Breeders' Cup Classic at Hollywood Park. And of course, the top 3-year-olds that year didn't make the Breeders' Cup Classic either. And therefore, that made Skipaway's win very easy in the Breeders' Cup Classic at Hollywood Park. He wasn't facing his two best and better rivals in the division. He wasn't facing the best 3-year-olds of that season. So I don't understand. It was slightly before my time as an Eclipse Award voter, and to this day, I do not understand, based on head to head results, how Skipaway won the award in 1997. And that vote by the voters choosing him had repercussions in other divisions because the horse of the year that year was the 2-year-old champion Favorite Trick, who had an incredible year, but you have to be ultra special, I think, to be a 2-year-old and win horse of the year. Only Secretariat in the Eclipse Award era had that accomplishment to his credit. And in retrospect, Favorite Trick being horse of the year when you had other really good horses like Gentleman, like Formal Gold, who were much more qualified. I just found just frankly, a ridiculous result. And the voters going for Favorite Trick that year and voting and going for Skipaway in this division, I think were just bad judgments, historically speaking.
I'm curious before you go, James, how long have you all both been voting on the Eclipse Awards?
I have voted every year except for 1 year since 1999.
James?
Yeah, I'm at I think almost 15 years. 15
Wow.
years
I
now.
wasn't trying to age you all. I just was curious. We got some veterans here. They know this history very well.
Yeah. Yeah, it could have
James,
been 2012 even, my first year voting.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's right, I think. I'm going to bring up, Vance mentioned about how first off, the Eclipse Awards got started around 1970. And in the
Mhm.
70s, 80s, 90s, even into the first decade this century, especially the first three I mentioned, there weren't the overwhelming majority of the block understood the categories where there was a turf award for champion turf male, and then the older dirt male went to horses running on the main track. And even in the synthetic age, those races on synthetic tracks were main track races. So those are sort of the equivalent of dirt wins in that era. And and but what happened was we got to like about 15, 20, last 20 years, and voters started uh, not being able to differentiate the categories. And my example of how the Eclipse Award voters understood the categories, no better example than 1984 when John Henry was Horse of the Year and he was champion turf male, but he didn't win any of his dirt starts that year, and they voted Slew of Gold champion older male. He was the best dirt horse that year. John Henry was the best turf and the horse of the year, but there was no giving a turf horse champion older male back then. And 2009, Giopani never won a race on dirt, but at least he ran second in the Classic, and I could understand giving him champion older male. In 2012, Wazdan came along, and all of his Grade 1 wins came on turf, but at least he won the Ben Ally and the older male division wasn't that strong that year in 2012. So you could make a case that he deserved all three Eclipse Awards in 2012: Horse of the Year, Champion Turf Male, and Champion Older Male. But in 2013, to give that Champion Older Male to Wise Dan was a joke. First off, Game On Dude had an enormous season that year. He won 5 stakes. He swept all the grade one premier events for older horses in California: the Santa Anita Handicap, the Hollywood Gold Cup, and the Pacific Classic. And he got beat in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and then he lost to Clark. And at the end of the year, the horse that really came on that year was Mucho Macho Man, who not only won the Grade 1 Awesome again, but he came back and won the Breeders' Cup Classic. And the horse he beat in the Classic, Will Take Charge, was Champion 3-year-old male and beat Game On Dude in the Clark. Those two horses got no recognition. One of those two had to be Champion Older Male that year because Wise Dan ran on the main track and he got beat. He ran in the Shadwell Turf Mile, which was moved to the Poly track at Keeneland, and got beat by Silver Max. So he undeservingly got 3 Eclipse Awards that year over 2 more than qualified older horses. The same thing happened the following year that you'll touch upon, Ashley, and the Eclipse Award Committee had to change the name of the award. So I wanted to point out that slight and how they had to change the name of the award because people couldn't understand that turf courses had their own category.
Right. You're touching on some of the horses that I'm going to mention, and the final year where the clarity, well, it wasn't clear in 2014 as well. It was named Older Male was the award, not Older Dirt Male. And you've mentioned some turf horses that did have a few starts on main tracks that won the award. But in 2014, you had a horse that raced exclusively on the turf, Main Sequence, who won Older Male over Palace Malice, who had 4 grade ones, I believe that, or 4 major wins that year. So did Main Sequence, but only over the turf. And the problem was in the history of the Eclipse Awards, they were starting in 1971. And back then we didn't have as many significant turf races and just really not as many turf races. But over time that was changing. And you've mentioned a lot of those horses, James, that they technically were turf horses, but because they did race over dirt or synthetic, they were able to qualify for Older Male. But there was top turf male as well. So it wasn't really fair that there's only one category for dirt horses to win and then technically 2 categories for these turf horses like Main Sequence. The voting ended up coming out 127 for Main Sequence and Palace Malice had 103. Wise Dan had 25 votes. It would have been his 3rd straight year winning. And I think he only raced on turf that year as well. But it was controversial because technically Palace Malice should have gotten the win because it was understood for a long time that a dirt horse should win Older Male. And because Main Sequence got it racing exclusively on the turf, and he raced on turf his whole career except for maybe 1 or 2 starts over in synthetic surface. But because of that, the next year it was decided that we needed a name change, Older Dirt Male, to make it very, very clear. And then the Older Dirt Female award came about as well, all because of this controversy where we had a turf horse who only raced on turf, and he did have 4 grade ones all on turf and very big grade 1 wins like the Sword Dancer that you see here and the Breeders' Cup Turf. But he took top turf male and older male that year and took it away from Palace Malice. So controversy, I suppose, ended after that, sort of. We'll see what the controversy is this year. Maybe there'll be some controversy.
Yeah, in the history of my voting, I always voted for dirt-oriented horses. So I did support Palace Malice, I did support Mucho Macho Man, and I even voted for Fort Larned, even though he had lost a head-to-head meeting with Wise Dan. I thought Fort Larned's win in the Breeders' Cup Classic put him over the top for that category. I did vote Wise Dan twice for Horse of the Year, so he deservedly won that award. But as everybody agrees here, that back then, the dirt horses deserved those awards more than the turf horses.
And we've had a lot of good turf runners. I mean, we've had Hall of Famers that were based here during the period. And, you know, it was just understood, you know, when these horses like Lure and other real notable Theatrical and others were winning big turf races, they were just going for the Turf Eclipse Award or potentially Horse of the Year.
I'm curious, back when this specific 2014 did a lot of voters, do you think vote turf just to make a point and say, well, if you're not going to change the name, then we're going to vote turf to prove that this is a little
Well,
bit.
if there wasn't a precedent, I mean, yeah, seemingly, but I mean, considering, I mean, you're just showing a lack of respect for the turf riders of the past by trying to, like, do that.
I think that a lot of people say there's no ironclad rules, there's no rules, there's no criteria. Well, just look back at the voting precedents. What did the voters of the past generations? How did they vote? Once you decipher that, and it's easy enough to do, then you kind of should follow what they did in the past, and it makes things much more easy.
Maybe we'll have a roundtable in the future where we debate other rule changes that should happen with the voting. But we will save that for another time or maybe just never. Anyway, that's enough time today for the Racing Roundtable. We will be back next Tuesday, some of us, to talk about the Chaluki, I believe, at Churchill Downs. We have the Claiming Crown coming up this Saturday. We'll have some other big stakes races at Aqueduct, and we might talk about some more history of the Eclipse Awards since we're getting to that point where we're going to find out very, very soon who wins all of the 2025 awards. But we will see you next Tuesday. And yeah, enjoy if you're watching U of L UK. Enjoy watching that game tonight.